ndatora chitupa chekumozambique. Last time takambotora tikavhotera. Ndinonzwa kufara nokuti ndatora chitupa chekumozambique. Last time takambotora tikavhotera president wekumozambique. Takavhotera kuno kuNemamwa. Saka iko zvino zvetinovimba kuti tichavhotazve. Tigoendawo kundoodhawo tiwana zvinhu zveMozambique.
Ndafara zvikuru nechitiko chaitika ichi. Ndavawo nechitupa chekumozambique. Ndakwanisawo kundovhota kumozambique. Ndakwanisawo kuenda kunohodha ndichidzoka. Kana kutora passport chaiyo kumozambique ndavakwanisawo kutora ndiriko kumozambique.
Akatombozuwa nevamwe chinzi vanhu vachandovhota here kana kuti vachavhotesa ndichaziva kuti vaivaiti kudii asi kuti ndakazviwawo kuti tichatopinda basa zvero nendatopindawo basa kana ndikavhota nendatobetserawo ikoko.
Nzwa kusununguka kunzwa kunakidzwa mukati mehana yangu kuti ndine chitupa chepaMozambique apa. Ndiri kuda kutoendako kundovhotesa, ndoda kundovhotesa varimo neni wacho ndichivhota. After that ndinoda kutora passport yeMozambique ndichizopatrola nayo right round the country, especially South Africa. Head kuti unonga uchitoenda zvako unodhindirwa gore rese uri muSouth Africa uchishanda uine passport yeMozambique.
There you have it. Good evening, Benjamin. What do you say?
Good evening to you. Yeah, interesting development. You know, I really didn't know that you could just easily get identification cards from other countries that easy. The other lady, they actually says that it's not the first time that she has actually voted using these means. So I think it's been something that has been going on for a very long time. It's wow. I'm actually shocked. I'm actually surprised. And actually, they not only do they vote, but they are one of the guys that actually assist the guys that are there to vote. So I didn't know all this. It's surprising.
Well, I think what must be said here is that all these people, all these Zimbabweans, are doing this out of desperation. They are not going there to Mozambique to go and vote because they genuinely want the ruling party to win. They have no political affiliation, these people. They've just been promised if you get a Mozambique ID, you can go and vote. And they are being recruited to go and vote for the ruling party. And they're willing to do it because they realize that it will allow them to go in and out of Mozambique in their efforts to earn a living. And the last lady was talking of if she has got a Mozambique passport, she can now travel to South Africa without any problems. Because as a Zimbabwean, the South African government is beginning to introduce many restrictions to make it very difficult for Zimbabweans to travel in and out of that country. So the individuals themselves are nothing more than just a victim of the failed system. What I find ridiculous here is that here is the Zimbabwe government encouraging this and thus undermining democracy in another country. What right does Zimbabwe have to interfere in the electoral process in Mozambique? It's bad enough that Zanu PF is rigging elections in Zimbabwe. Now it is extending its reach and allowing Zimbabweans to go and vote in Mozambique. That is what I find so outrageous in this particular case.
For me, what I think there is an agreement. I mean, just not long back, we had, the ruling parties, or the liberation movements actually have a seminar, or I don't know, a gathering in Victoria Falls. I think, these are some of the strategies that they develop, and they come together to discuss ways of how to undermine democracy, how to sway the voters or to vote into their favor. And this is one tactic where, if your own countrymen do not like you, why don't you just go and get from your neighbor and infiltrate them into the society and have them tilt the ballot towards them. And I mean, it's very sad, but I think there should be an agreement that that came between Mozambique and government and Zimbabwe government, to actually do this, because from what that woman says, it's not the first time this has happened. She actually went and voted the previous time, so for me now, it's scary to say, for all these years, it's been happening. And most probably, I mean, a favor, you always have to return a favor. And I think, some of the ridiculous numbers that we end up having, where you find there is absolutely nobody in that area that, and then you find there's 30,000-40,000 voters, votes cast. I think this is another way that they're actually doing this, and which is quite sad, which is very, very sad to actually see that the problem is not only in Zimbabwe, but it's now, the whole of SADC, which is very, very sad, if not Africa.
Well, in this particular case, let's not lose sight of what is happening here. It is, I agree, an arrangement between the Zimbabwe government and the Mozambique government. In the past, we have had reports of people in Mozambique being issued with Zimbabwean IDs to allow them and being registered as voters in Zimbabwe, to allow them to go to Zimbabwe and vote. So yes, these Zimbabweans, I'm sure, would not be doing this without the Mozambican government's cooperation. But as a nation, Zimbabwe has got an obligation to the people of Zimbabwe to hold free, fair, and credible elections. And it's bad enough that the regime has failed to meet its obligation. What is becoming outrageous here is that it is now extending its reach into neighboring countries like Mozambique and undermining the democratic process there. That is what is completely unacceptable. The Mozambique government, as much as one can say it should not interfere in Zimbabwe's election, as a Zimbabwean, we have got to start with our own government and make it abundantly clear that this is totally unacceptable. Am I surprised? No, I'm not surprised. This is a regime that has no respect for free, fair, and credible elections. Mnangagwa promised that he will hold free, fair, and credible elections when he took over from Mugabe in 2017. But that is one promise that anyone with half a brain would have told you he had no intention of meeting. None. And it is not surprising that he's doing this. But nonetheless, people must condemn it in the strongest of languages. And I think that is the number one message that we've got to send here. You allow a regime like this Zanu PF dictatorship to do this, and they are destabilizing the whole region. The whole SADC region is being destabilized by this kind of activity. At the present moment, Mozambique has had endless problems since its independence in 1975, because that is another country that also has failed its obligation to hold free, fair, and credible elections. We've heard of stories of Renamo and then the uprising in the north. And they are all politically related. And when something like this happens, it only fuels that discontent among the people in that country. If you cannot trust a system to deliver the democratic will of the people, then you're inviting violence, because people have got to say, they have got a right to have a meaningful say. And if you deny them that meaningful say, a peaceful, meaningful say, they will resort to other means. And I'll be furious if Mozambique was to be involved in any way in disrupting elections in Zimbabwe. I hope good SADC are taking note of this. And what they did last year by failing to stand up to the regime when the SADC election observer group condemned Zimbabwe's election, SADC should have made it very clear that that is totally unacceptable. They did not. And this is exactly payback. The regime is now extending its tentacles and disrupting another country. Mozambique is due to hold its election in October. And this is what we are saying. This is really outrageous.
Yes, it is. The scary thing is, like you just said, Mozambique has its own fair share of problems. And here we are going to go and meddle in their affair. I'm sure they will not take it lightly when they actually get to hear about this here, and they'll be wondering for how long has this been going on. And I must say, I think Zimbabwe, its involvement in such an act, let me not say Zimbabwe, but our government, Zanu PF involvement in such a case, just shows, I think, how low they can go just to protect their own interest. I mean, surely denying us a meaningful vote, but to go to an extent of going to go and deny another country. And yes, I honestly also believe that I am sure they are in agreement with the Mozambican government. There is absolutely no way they can give IDs to some, to people that cannot, produce. I mean, you have to produce something to get an ID. And if you don't have that ID, and some of these people, they cannot even speak, Portuguese, right? So how do they communicate when they're actually giving somebody an ID? I think they're in it together. They're in bed together in this one here. And I must say, if this rot is this, is like this, I wonder how deep this rot is to the whole of SADC as an organization. I'm sure it's because, I mean, they just came together. Let's not forget. These ruling parties came together recently to discuss strategies and to share. And I'm sure this is one of the strategies that they've been sharing to deny people on both sides of the border and SADC as a whole, the right to a true and meaningful democratic process or a democratic election. And for me, I think it's unacceptable. And you are very right to say this must be spoken with a loud voice, with a stern voice, and issue warnings to say, this, the powers that be, the SADC, the observers, whoever needs to know, should know and also, say the findings as it is.
Well, the other thing that I thought we need to cover here is look at the map of Zimbabwe. Masvingo is there, and there is the Zimbabwe-Mozambique border. So the women who were talking here were from Masvingo area. I'm not sure where they got their Mozambique ID cards, but you're right. The chances are most of these people from Masvingo would not speak any of the local languages in Mozambique. One can understand if they came from close to the border, where the crossover between the two people will be very close, probably speak the same language, meet on a regular basis, know each other very well. But for somebody coming from as far as Masvingo to be getting a Mozambique ID, it beggars belief. If these women traveled somewhere closer to the border where they're being issued with these IDs, it must show that they are also equally desperate. It is a pity that Zimbabwe's economic and political meltdown and instability has put the ordinary Zimbabweans in an untenable situation. These people are doing this out of desperation. I think that point must be emphasized. These people are not doing this out of malice. These are ordinary women, desperate to earn a living. They are now resorting to the point of getting IDs and passports, even foreign passports, just because they need to go in and out of Mozambique to do their informal trading out of desperation. And some of them are seeing this as an opportunity for them to extend their reach, get a Mozambique passport so that they can travel now to South Africa. Because to go to South Africa now, the South African government is beginning to impose rules, making it very difficult for Zimbabweans to go to South Africa and work there. We need a permanent solution to our political crisis. Zimbabwe had the opportunity to end our political crisis last year by making sure that the elections are declared null and void. SADC election observers had done the country a favor by condemning those elections. But that has come to nothing for no other reason other than that the opposition participated in those elections in numbers. The opposition, Triple C, was lying to the people, saying that Triple C was going to win big to get people to participate in those elections. Whether we like to admit it or not, the truth of the matter is that give the SADC leaders the excuse to do nothing about the report that condemned those elections as being flawed and illegitimate. people themselves, the ordinary Zimbabweans themselves, by participating in the flawed elections, believing Chamisa's idiotic promise that Triple C was going to win, have put the country into this mess. The people of Zimbabwe have got to wake up. We cannot expect Zanu PF to change. And we can see how desperate Zanu PF is to stay in power. This is an act of desperation. This is a regime that last year was issuing people from Mozambique with IDs, Zimbabwean IDs, so that they could vote in Zimbabwe. And now it is willingly allowing ordinary Zimbabweans to get Mozambican IDs and encouraging them to vote. They are bribed, promise, well, if you get a Mozambique passport now, you'll be able to go in and out of Mozambique freely to do your informal trading. If the country was doing well economically, they would not be resorting to this desperation. That is the point.
Yes, I agree with you. It's pretty sad how shallow some guys can get to just to hold on to power. I mean, I think this is as low as one can get, where you end up having, we know that they hire people from within Zimbabwe, and they do the vote rigging and vote buying and all that. But that is not enough. You have to go and get other nationals to come and still sway the vote, in your favor. I think that is shallow. And I must say, I'm also disappointed in the Mozambican government for not. I mean, you cannot say that they failed to do their due diligence to check whether this is their national or not. I mean, it's simple. They should be able to communicate. I would have understood probably somebody that is, just on the border, which is Chipinge, let me just say the Manicaland area. I would understand. They walk through the border. But to come as from, Masvingo, which is almost right in the middle of Zimbabwe, is there's no excuse. And I mean, surely the way we do our things and how you can just tell. So I think, there is no excuse for both governments to be doing this year, and this year needs to be stopped, and people should speak up against such practices. I think that is just it's despicable, to say the least. Thank you.
Well, for my closing remarks is that this is not going to stop. This is a regime, Zanu PF regime, that is desperate to hang on to power and will stop at nothing. As much as we can say that the Mozambique government should be diligent, there is no doubt that the Mozambique government itself is desperate to hang on to power at all costs. So this is a cooperation between the ruling party in Zimbabwe and the ruling party in Mozambique. But it is a short-sighted maneuvering, because by undermining the democratic process, particularly a country like Mozambique that has had so many instability throughout its history, this will just be one more excuse for the insurgents to be active in that country. if the country cannot count on the party of the day to hold free, fair, and credible elections, then it doesn't come as any surprise at all that people lose confidence in the electoral process. And if you lose confidence in the electoral process, you open doors for people to resort to other ways to make sure that they are ahead. The political instability in Zimbabwe is spilling over into neighboring countries in the region, destabilizing the whole of SADC. There are millions. Somebody was talking yesterday that there are 3 million Zimbabweans in South Africa. There are probably hundreds of thousands of Zimbabweans in Botswana. Maybe not as many in Mozambique, in Zambia, in Namibia, and other countries. Zimbabweans have been scattered all over the region and beyond because of the 44 years of gross mismanagement, rampant corruption, and tyrannical Zanu PF rule. Ending the Zanu PF tyranny is not going to be easy. And this is just one more story to show that the regime is absolutely determined to hang on to power at all costs. Meanwhile, it's dragging the nation deeper and deeper into the economic and political crisis. All we can do is condemn. Zanu PF has no right to interfere in the democratic process of Mozambique. As much as we condemn Zanu PF rigging Zimbabwean elections, that is our own problem. But when you start reaching into a neighbor's country, even if it has been unstable, that is a problem of the people of Mozambique to deal with. We do not have to involve ourselves in aiding and abetting that instability. Mnangagwa has no excuse to allow this to happen. Government should be issuing a statement right now that any Zimbabwean who gets a foreign ID, a foreign passport, must know that if that should be discovered, it's a criminal offense. And if it is discovered and found they were doing it to destabilize another country, the punishment should be even more severe. We should not look for quick solutions to our own problems by undermining the democratic process, destabilizing a neighboring country. This is like you going to a neighbor's place to cause trouble just because you have got problems of your own at home. That is absolutely no excuse. As much as those women are saying they are going to find it easier for them to do their informal trading, you can do your informal trading, but do it legally. And for you to start combining your informal trading with illegal political activities, that is totally unacceptable. That must be condemned in the strongest of languages. We cannot have this circus of individuals being so selfish to the point they are willing to destabilize another country. Mozambique has got a right to define their own destiny. And when you start interfering in the electoral process, that is unforgivable. Zanu PF may have its own motives for encouraging this thing, but you as a citizen of Zimbabwe, you have got a duty to yourself and to your fellow Zimbabweans to keep the peace between Zimbabwe and Mozambique. The people of Mozambique have not done us any wrong. But when you go in there to destabilize their political system, that is totally unacceptable. If I was a Mozambican, I would be absolutely furious to see a Zimbabwean coming to my own country and undermining our democratic process, destabilizing the nation. I find it unacceptable that anyone would think that solving their own economic problems is more important than considering other people's right. I salute the Mirror, the Masvingo Mirror, the paper that came up with this story. I'm sure that if there was an independent press in towns like Mozambique, nearer the Mutare, nearer the Mozambique border, this story would be shown to be a very common practice right along the Zimbabwe-Mozambique border. It must be condemned, and we must condemn it unreservedly. Any Zimbabwean who gets a Mozambican passport is committing a crime. That is a crime. You're falsifying your own identity to get another nation's documents. And for you to go one step further and abuse that document to cast the vote, nobody is forcing you to go across to Mozambique to go and vote. You are doing that freely out of your selfish needs. That is totally unacceptable. Come the 9th of October, I hope that we are not going to see Zimbabweans crossing the border to go and vote. That is totally unacceptable. Just as much as we condemn Mozambicans coming into Zimbabwe to vote, we must equally condemn Zimbabweans going into Mozambique to vote. You are voting illegally for the purposes of disrupting the political process in that country. You have no right to vote in Mozambique. And you have no right to getting any documentation pretending that you are a citizen of that country. As much as it may help you with your own informal activities, that has got to be condemned. And to do it for political reason is unforgivable. Thank you very much, Benjamin. I don't know whether you want to make your closing remarks.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just want to emphasize, like you said, you know, it's unacceptable. I would rather have somebody get, you know, the ID for their own purpose, but not to go to an extent of saying, you know, I can go and vote, and you know, that's something that is sacred for another country and their citizens. Let us learn to respect one another. and stop that nonsense once and for all. And and for both governments, the Zimbabwe government and the Mozambican government, I'm sure now that the cat is out of the bag. I'm sure the Mozambicans will hear about this, but let us not go into violence. But let us approach and and make sure that this process is dealt with once and for all. That's what I think should be done going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for joining us tonight. In future, if you want to join in the debate, send your comment and we'll send you the link. Yes, I totally agree with you. I think it is important here. I would like to emphasize the point here that Zanu PF is doing this out of desperation. This is a regime that is so desperate to stay in power, it will do anything. Rigging Zimbabwean elections is unacceptable. But when you start extending your tentacles in other countries, that is an outrage. The people of Mozambique and people of Zimbabwe have been very close. Ironically, Zanu PF carried out most of its liberation activities from Mozambique. The people of Mozambique supported the people of Zimbabwe's struggle for independence. But what we are doing now is paying them in the worst currency you can possibly repay, in betrayal. We are not interested, we are not there to decide for the people of Mozambique who should govern Mozambique. It's for the people of Mozambique to do that themselves. They have the right to a meaningful election, to a meaningful say in who governs their country. That point is not negotiable. As much as Zanu PF may say they were close to the ruling party in Mozambique right now, that has nothing to do with Zimbabwe interfering in that country. It's an electoral process. This is the typical Putin mentality, interfering in other countries' democratic process. We are not going to tolerate it, and we should condemn it in the strongest of languages. And I seriously hope that those people in the SADC Secretariat are going to do something about this. This cannot be allowed to continue. If we're going to start destabilizing each other, tomorrow Mozambique will be doing the same thing to Zimbabwe or to another country. Are we going to say nothing? I think this is the kind of thing that we should never, ever allow to happen. And again, I speak to those Zimbabweans who have got those ideas. What you're doing is wrong. That is not, there is absolutely no excuse for you to get a foreign ID, whatever selfish purpose. You may be having economic hardships in Zimbabwe, but let's not try to solve them by undermining a neighbor. If you are listening, you should give up that ID, using it even for going into Mozambique to do your trading using a foreign ID is unacceptable. But to go there to disrupt the electoral process in that country, go there to vote because Zanu PF instructed you to vote for party A instead of party B, is totally outrageous. You are being used by Zanu PF to commit a serious crime. It's bad enough that people were being frog-marched in Zimbabwe to go and vote for Zanu PF. But to allow that you yourself to be frog-marched into Mozambique to do the same thing is unacceptable. Come the 9th of October, if somebody comes to your house and force you to go to Mozambique to vote, that's another matter. But for you to freely go to Mozambique to vote is unforgivable. Totally unforgivable. Travel all the way from Masvingo to go to Mozambique to vote, to disrupt. That is totally unforgivable. One cannot overemphasize that. We cannot have that. And it's totally must be condemned in the strongest of languages. And I hope that papers like Masvingo Mirror are going to monitor this and document it. Shame on you as a Zimbabwean who think that they can solve their own problems by being selfish to the point of disrupting another nation's electoral process. I'm really, truly ashamed that this is happening. Thank you very much, Benjamin, and to the listeners who were able to join us tonight. Thank you again for being with us. I hope you'll be able to join us tomorrow. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.